they were saying that if you had looked at the amount of skin cancer, for example, and the sale of ice cream, you could kind of draw a correlation there that potentially, the rate of ice cream sales is resulting in, skin cancer or even like something maybe not as severe, maybe sunburn. And you can kind of graph those and they would look like they have a fairly strong correlation. What worries me about looking at data and when there's not a lot of data points and looking at two things and seeing if there's correlation, especially with these kind of numbers, is do we actually know what's working? And are we at a risk of also making that same type of mistake with the data? And like, do you have any other examples where that kind of thing is, quite apparent and it looks obvious, like there is a relationship there, but there actually isn't?
Yeah. So there's a few things to unpack there. Ice cream's largely a seasonal dessert. Like people still have it in winter, but they largely have it on nicer days. Nicer days are more likely to be outside. Outside, they're more likely to get sunburned. There's an entire website, though, called Spurious Correlations, and they have so many of these. It's beautiful. The number of people who drowned by falling into a pool correlates with films Nicolas Cage appeared in that year. So it's 66% correlated, which is really high. The per capita cheese consumption correlates with the number of people who died by becoming tangled in their bed sheets. 94% correlation there, so super high.
Wow.
And apparently people die by becoming tangled in their bed sheets. So there's two things to learn there, which is really useful.
Yeah.
In a business, so a lot of the times, one of the major issues with analysis, especially machine-led analysis, is it relies heavily on those correlations. And unless the analyst knows what they're doing, it doesn't imply common sense as well.
Yeah.
So for something like marketing mix modeling or attribution modeling, it would come up and say that TV is negative. So every time you run a TV ad, you lose sales. Yeah. Which makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
But according to the modeling, because there's not an immediate spike when you run TV, because it's generally a lag channel, it's something that takes a while to build up, then it's having no effect. So you're spending all this money, you're getting no impact, and so it comes through as negative. So if you just looked at the correlations there, you'd be taking all of your money out of TV, you move it all into digital, which has a great short-term effect. But then you have the issue we have at the moment, which is short-termism. So all this money's gone into digital, and it helps you finish off the bottom of your funnel. So if you've got people in your customer funnel, digital's really good at people at the bottom who are ready to buy. So it helps you get rid of all of those, but you've had no channels that have filled in the rest of the funnel. And so short-term correlation would be great. You look at it over a year or two, it becomes terrible. And people don't understand why.
Yeah, because that web is much bigger than just the endpoint when you're looking at such a narrow data point there.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's synergies between channels as well. So if you're running something like a TV campaign and then you're running display advertising, so those little ads you see pop up on newspapers, websites, and other things, if you have similar images between the two, you're more likely to get click-through and more likely to get stronger impressions from those display ads because otherwise people ignore them. And if you've ever been an ugly person at a party, you know how easy it is for someone to ignore someone or ignore something else they don't want to see.
Yeah.
But if you see a friend at the party, no matter if they're ugly or not, you're like, hey, that's my friend.
Yeah,
but if you don't know them, just completely blind, which can be a bit of an issue.
Yeah.
So in a business, the way you test it, the way you need to deal with this is basically hypothesis testing. So if you're going to run something, build a forecast out for what's going to happen beforehand. So you run your null hypothesis and say, if we don't do this, this will be the outcome. And that also allows you to set a success hypothesis, which is basically saying, I expect this increase in spend to drive sales up by 10%. And so that way you have an upper and lower bounds. And when you run your test, you can say, all right, we had that correlation beforehand. We're testing that out now. All right, we did this, nothing changed. That's strange. Or we did this and we got above our sales target. So we can say that that's worked. And you can repeat that hypothesis test again and again and again and ensure that it's continuing to work because obviously people change and situations change going forward. But without running that kind of hypothesis test, you will have no idea whether it's just correlation or causation.
Yeah, and I think that's critical, isn't it? So you really need to identify if what you've done has resulted in these numbers, or they're actually, it's just a coincidence that those numbers have gone up at the same time, or
Yeah.
they've gone down at the same time.
Yeah, and unless you're looking at like the wider array of variables, you're never going to know what's actually driving things. So
Yeah.
it could be competitors were spending at the time. It could have been a newspaper article came out. It could be that the weather was higher that day, so your sales increased because more people were out and about and there was better foot traffic. There's a range of things that can affect these sales. But if all you're looking is at that single metric and the single metric affecting it, you're likely to miss the actual true impact of things.
Yeah, well, it's so broad, isn't it? Because there could be a sporting event on the same day. There could be a national event that's happening. It could have been a terrorist attack or something like that, which has driven people to do different behaviors than they would normally do. And yeah, it's completely skewed the numbers and changed the outcomes.
Yeah, which again is why you can't look at a single day.
Yeah.
So as we were talking about at the start, you have to look at this over a range of time. Yeah. Otherwise, those single spikes will affect the way things are happening.